Thank you everyone for coming tonight to the Big Texas Read. We have an amazing writer with us and an amazing moderator. Let me thank a couple of the bookstores, Interrobang Books in Dallas, Twig Books in San Antonio, the University of Texas at San Antonio, not their bookstore, but their library. They've been very helpful and supportive. And to my lovely co-host, Alexander Vandekamp of Gemini Inc., which is one of the greatest literary organizations to ever grace the planet.
Wow, cool. I just wanted to, so David and I are your co-hosts tonight. I'm the executive director of Gemini Inc. Like I said briefly before, we are San Antonio's Writing Arts Center. We love events like tonight. We like to bring readers and writers together. And, the Big Texas Read was born out of the pandemic, but it's a life of its own. And we love featuring a different Texas author every month. And November, we are lucky to have Edward Vidaurre. Woo! And he'll be, our featured book is this amazing book called Pandemia and Other Poems, published by Aztlan Libre Press in 2021. And our guest moderator is going to be Juan Tejeda, co-publisher of that press, and a wonderful San Antonio literary force that we're very happy to have in our backyard. So I just ask that you stay muted throughout this event. Edward will start by reading a few of his poems, and then we're going to have Juan take over the quote-unquote virtual mic and moderate a discussion until about 8. But please post your questions in the chat, because for the last part, from like 8 and on till 8:30, is an audience Q&A, and we want to hear from you, and we can share your questions with Edward. You can even unmute and ask the question yourself. And feel free to say hello to one another in the chat and just have, leave some fun comments. And then I'm just going to hand it back to you, Edward. You want to just introduce our moderator and host, and then we'll take it from there.
You want me to?
You want me to do it?
No, you said Edward, and I was like, I don't think Edward's introducing anybody.
Oh my God.
That's
yeah,
okay.
So I'm a
No,
little
but
tired.
you can...
I tend to cross signals with words when I'm tired. Yeah, I meant David.
Do you have their bios up? Do you want to just keep going?
Yeah, sure. First, I'd love to introduce, I'm going to introduce Edward first. He's a very prolific writer. I wish I could write books as fast as you, Edward. You're pretty amazing. And a very gifted writer. His writings have appeared or they're forthcoming in the New York Times Magazine, the Texas Observer, Grist, Poet Lore, the Acentos Review, Poetry Bay, Voices de la Luna, as well as other journals and anthologies. He's the author of 7 collections of poetry. He was also the 2018-19 City of McAllen, Texas Poet Laureate, a 4-time Pushcart nominated poet, no small achievement. He's the very groundbreaking, highly interesting publisher of FlowerSong Press. So if you don't know what FlowerSong Press is, it's a wonderful press. It's published some great poets, prose writers. Check it out. And I've always loved that name, Edward of your press. He's from Boyle Heights, California, and now resides in McAllen with his wife and daughter. Our guest moderator is the one and only Juan Tejeda. He's retired. He retired in 2016 from Palo Alto College in San Antonio, Texas, where he was professor of Mexican American Studies and music. He's a writer, musician, and activist who plays the button accordion and sings traditional conjunto music with the Conjunto Aztlan and his primo, Mano Armando Tejeda. He's also the wife of Nisa Nufre, who's the amazing marketing director of Gemini Inc., but the other literary hat she wears is she's co-owners and publishers of Aztlan Libre Press, which is, of course, the publisher of the book we're featuring tonight, Pandemia and Other Poems. So, Edward, you want to begin by just giving us a sampling of some of those poems, and then Juan, I'll let you take it from there.
Sure thing. Thank you. Thank you, Gemini Inc., for having me, and thank you to the Big Texas Read. Appreciate you. Thank you, Juan Tejeda and Anissa, Aztlan Libre Press, for believing in my words, in my work. And I'll start with the first poem in the collection, titled Creation. Day 1. Everything crawled. God was heard but not heard. The trees were rooted first. They intertwined inside Mother. Then came the big yawn. Sprouting ocean, sprouting sound. Everything crawled on the first day. Day 2. God was speaking to the earth, which was now formed, and he was playing with swatches, deciding on a color for the sky. For the early part of the morning, the atmosphere was pink, then yellow. Then he tried one other color, but decided on what we see now. For some, it's still black. That other color, it's a mystery. And in the distance, mountains went up, and a figure could be seen walking. Day 3, a whispering wind, a wandering spirit, birds, clay, duendes, the figure gets closer. Day 4, the rivers dried up, so we called on darkness. It got cold, so we called on light. A confetti of white rain fell over the mountains, even the figure stopped to see. Day 5, love was created, so the things that crawled grew limbs and didn't move. For 100 days the trees grew fruit, the mountains grew flowers in purples and reds. The sound of water was heard, and the breeze was perfect. The crawlers, now upright, smiled and felt things inside, but still had no eyes. The figure disappeared too. Day 6, there was a vibration in the air. To describe it, a bass whomp. The skin on the upright thing that no longer crawled rattled. From its head emerged eyes, and the vibrating stopped. Yellow flowers bloomed all around its feet. Over the hills, roars and grunts, a stampede chasing a sunset. The figure fell into a deep sleep. The animals were marking their territory. Day 7. God walks the land. The animals gaze on the yellow flowers. The birds glide above. The figure opens its eyes. God says, you will be a man, reproducer and ally. I will return in 400 years and introduce you to a perfect mate. Man works the land, eats and drinks and grows strong. Then comes the giants, non-human, half beast, half something strange. Day 8, the figure appears anew. Day 9, the man is tired. God appears as promised. It's 400 years since they spoke. The earth has formed. The mountains took shape. The seasons learned each other. The rivers crossed each other, and the seas took their piece of the world. The giants lived and died, and some disappeared into the woods and sky. On day 9 of God, he finished creating the world with the introduction of woman. On day 11, a child was born, a boy who is yet to be identified. The boy would be named COVID-19. My next poem is titled Sleepless in Pandemia. I can't sleep much these days, yet I'm tired and need to. I'm filled with strange dreams that seem to be building a mini-series of grim realities at every turn. In the morning, I let out the dogs. There's a yellow haze that floats in my town, a stick-to-your-skin enfermedad. This pandemic has me thinking, is there a God? Then I remember the stories, the poetry and the prose of the antepasados, the faith of my abuela, the observation of nature's language, and I breathe in place. Pandemia, virus, we seem to be more together in this distance. This morning, the first flock of loros made their way to the wires above our house, cantando, a grackle perched, head lowered, at a distance. Great, thank you.
Juan, I think we're going to hand it over to you, and feel free to kick off, an author talk with Edward based on this book.
Well, thank you. I'm Juan Tejeda, as you heard, and I'm moderating tonight this Plática and poetry reading with Edward Vidaurre, and we're featuring the book that we at Aztlan Libre Press published, Pandemia and Other Poems. My wife, Anissa Onofre, who's also publications, promotions director there at Gemini Inc. We are co-owners and co-publishers of Aztlan Libre Press, based out of here in Yanaguana in San Antonio, Texas. So we're very glad to be here today, and I want to thank Gemini Inc. for inviting me, and also the Dallas Writing Workshop, and the Big Texas Read. You heard a couple of poems by Edward Vidaurre to open up, and I briefly just want to mention that Edward is an award-winning author and poet. As Alexandra mentioned, this Pandemia and Other Poems is his latest publication, and he's published 7 books before, well, including Pandemia. And his book, Jazz House, was winner of the Award of Merit for Best Book of Poetry by the Texas Philosophical Society. And this book, in fact, Pandemia and Other Poems, which is his latest book, we published this in 2020, last year, at the height of the pandemic. It was a finalist for Best Book of Poetry in 2021, just this past year, from the Writers League of Texas. So we're very proud of Edward and of this book also. We think it's great. Edward's a great poet. Edward, maybe we can start a little bit with maybe just your background. I like to start with the poet, and then we can get into Pandemia in just a bit, the book itself, and have you read a couple of other pieces. But you're originally of Salvadoran parents and from LA, right? Tell us a little bit about your early years.
Right. My mother is Salvadoreña. I was raised for a while by just my mom, single mother home, and then my stepfather came into the picture when we were young kids, and he's from Michoacan, Mexico. And so we grew up with both cultures of Mexican and Salvadoran, and so I grew up in Boyle Heights. They're in the projects of Aliso Village. For a while, we were latchkey kids because both parents worked, all day. So we were, the kids that had to fend for ourselves while our parents worked and went to school, came home, and had to figure it out, how to figure out how to do our homework, how to cook for ourselves, how to, keep the house clean. So when, mom and dad got home, everything was, taken care of, most of the time. Right. So, but yeah, grew up in Boyle Heights and lived there till I was about, I want to say 16, 17. And then I moved to Oxnard, California to finish high school. Lived over there with an uncle and cousins. And then went back to East LA to live there with my mom again, and until I, got out there on my own and kind of bounced around the LA area and looked, trying to find myself and stuff like that. Worked the restaurant business and, for a long time, still doing it, still, doing the restaurant business. I'm a restaurant manager still, but now I'm also a publisher of books. But yeah, I grew up at the height of the crack epidemic. I was a kid watching the brown berets walk through the neighborhood in protest, and so I saw a lot of things that I didn't understand growing up until I got older, and now that I read and understand what was going on. I lived through the LA riots. So, it was a trippy bring up. I didn't become a poet until, or I didn't start writing poetry until I moved to Texas.
Mm.
It was the big slowdown in my life. When I came here, it was a big, like a put on the brakes. Everything was fast paced living in LA. And then when I came here, it seemed like I was able to breathe and slow down and focus. And so that's how poetry came into my life, and was able to focus more on literature and things like that. And so I became a poet.
And you came to Texas when, Edward?
I came here. Okay, it's going to be 21 years. Yeah.
And I should mention that you went down to the Valley of Texas, and that's where you live right now
Yeah.
in McAllen. Is that where you initially arrived coming in from LA in McAllen?
San Benito.
In
Yeah.
San Benito, close by.
San
All of the
Benito.
little towns in the valley are close
Yeah.
by, Um,
Yeah.
and that's pretty amazing that you began writing. So you didn't write, poetry when you were young then until you
Well,
came to Texas 21 years ago.
I used to love to write, but I used to like to. My writing was writing down lyrics of music that I loved, and then reading it over. I
Mm,
used to like to um, just write. I used to like to write whole pages from the dictionary. Just to write. I loved to write. That I just didn't care what it was. I couldn't, I guess, write out of my own imagination yet, but I like to copy, lyrics. I used to like to write it and then read my own writing. I used to like to see it in print and then write it in my own writing, because I used to like to sharpen my penmanship.
mm.
I used to like to write in cursive, and so um, I love doing it. I would sit down, on the floor with a cuaderno, and just write and write and write and write, and then until the ink or the marker ran out of till it ran out of ink, until the ink just finished on the marker or the pen, and just it was just like this, like a tick that I had, and not until I got older, and then I would you start writing love letters and stuff like that, and and then it started reading. I used to like to read Hallmark cards, for their wit and for the short, for so much meaning in such a short writing, right? And it was like, wow, like so much is said in this little card. And so I didn't realize that it was like a training that was happening to me to become a poet later in life.
Mm.
The loving the lyrics in music. I always appreciated the songwriter. I loved music of all sorts, but I loved, the songwriter. I always looked for who wrote that song, because the music's beautiful, but who wrote it? Yeah, he sings nice, she sings beautifully, but who wrote it? I was very interested in who did that. So le buscaba, and so I was looking and looking, and was very interested in that. And so, that's where I love to research it, and so yeah, that's how I did it.
I love the fact that you talk about that you started writing lyrics to songs. Always, I think there's been a very special relationship between, obviously, the lyrics of the song and poetry. I
Yeah.
mean, basically, the lyrics of the song are poetry. It is poetry, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't think about that crossover in literature, and that song and songs are also a literature if you think about it. And I love the fact that you're very lyrical and rhythmic in your writing, and of course you're bilingual, Spanish and English, and you use that in your writings also. And you have a very special relationship with jazz. Your award-winning book was called Jazz House, and even in this book, Pandemia and Other Poems, you use jazz in it. And in fact, I really dig the poem. Maybe you can read it right now from Pandemia called Jazzista. First of all, what is a jazzista, Edward?
A jazzista? Well,
Yeah.
it's like a guitarrista,
There
you
you go.
know, right? Right? Like someone that's all about jazz. Um, but I know you've said it before. You like that poem. Yeah, and I had fun writing because it did bounce around, and I do play with I guess sound in this poem. But it's funny, being someone who loves lyrics and loves music, I'm not one to write rhyming poetry,
Hmm.
right? Even though I've read so many lyrics throughout my life and listened to so much music, and especially hip hop growing up, I've never been one to write in rhyme or you know, or like that. And it just, it doesn't come naturally to me, you know. It's to me, for me, it seems like I would have to force a poem for it to rhyme. So there's times where I've written stuff and it rhymes, and I'm like, whoa, I'm like, that's pretty cool because I didn't mean for it to happen. And that's when it feels so special to me. But yeah, let me read a jazzista. What makes a jazz poet? Not his shoes, not mine, bent to one side like a matador waving a red trapo en la cocina to shoo away las moscas laying on the lip of my taza de café con leche. Definitely not a grito. Not writing a poem during a cool daku of Miles or Nina talking in French. Bon sang. An election is tweaked to the sound of a trumpet solo. Now that's Vux like it sucks. Orale, cliche. Even as a Latino youth, we be real cool, but not too cool to be called a cool. Oh, so we stay trucha like Coltrane and Tito, Arturo y Cachao, Bebo y Bobo, stirring the beans with manteca de Gillespie. Jazzistas live like cucarachas. They lay low and grab you by the huevos when you least expect it. When everything around you seems to be dying, the only thing louder than a bomb is the slow death of a jazz sound. A hard jazz, an accusation. Yeah, a bop. A hard 12 bar pandemic.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it was yeah, I was listening to a lot of jazz and you know, reading titles and just, you know, just loving it, you know. Just I really dig it, you know. When I wrote Jazz House, I had just moved into this house that we're in now, and we had just purchased it, well, you know. And I found the spot that I love to write in. Everything was perfect for writing. Everything just seemed to be great. I had a great window view of you know, of the yard, you know, the sounds of nature outside. Had the view to the kitchen, and sometimes my wife would walk in and out of it, and she would, you know, be doing stuff in there, and you know, she'd be listening to jazz in the bedroom, you know, putting on makeup or just, you know, just lounging and chilling and just hanging out. But everything was so like relaxed, and but there was always jazz playing. And I use jazz a lot when I'm like editing, or when I'm even when I want to write. I'll put something very chill, something smooth. um and for a long time jazz was just playing. And so I was like, well, you know, this is such a jazzy house, you know. And it just stuck, you know. The name was always there, the music was always there. And so, you know, I was like, this is you know, this is pretty cool, you know. And it just felt right.
And I like the way you integrate the Spanish and some of the Latin jazz greats, and even some Pachuco slang, calor, like orale, trucha. You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
really you're speaking in, 3 or 4 different languages there, musical, poetic, Spanish, English, Galo, and so forth. I love that.
And growing up in Boyle Heights there in East LA, I grew up around Pachucos. I grew up around, I mean, I was predominantly um, surrounded by Mexicanos,
Mm.
and by cholos and cholas, and so we were always trying to fit in to the cultura mexicana, to the cholo and to the Chicano, and we had like a lot of us, kind of joined into it because there we're trying to fit in. There was that identity crisis too. Like where do we fit in this melting pot, in this barrio. We're There's just like a handful of us from Central America, and everyone else is Mexican, and now dad is Mexican. And mom adopted the culture of Mexico by making the comidas mexicanas, and stuff. Our neighbors were both Mexican, and they were the comadres of my mother, and the kids, our friends, were all Mexicanos, and so um it wasn't a bad thing, but not until we got a little older we started seeing the differences and the friction between the Central American and the Mexican. And so then it was more of a conflict within me because I was like, where do I fit in? How do I can't, I mean, I'm torn, I'm torn. And that's where how my book Chicano Blood Transfusion kind of was adopted, the name, where it's like, inject me with a Chicano's blood, because I'm not Chicano, but people think I'm Chicano. And then at the end of it, I get the transfusion from Juan Felipe Herrera, Chicano, and then afterwards, I feel the same. I'm still the Guanaco, I'm still the Chicano, I'm still the Angelino. I didn't need that to be who I am. I didn't, that identity crisis was just all made up. I can be myself. I don't need to change. I don't need to be this person. I don't need to be that person. And so, yeah, it's there was a lot of movimiento in my mind that was also making it crazy in my writing, right?
Mm.
So, and then living on along the border is another thing too, right? It's like my people come from two borders. They have to cross two borders, right? So we're fighting a border here, but by the time they get here, they've already fought another border on the Guatemalan Mexican border. And so there's a lot of things that really dig into my mindset, especially when writing, especially when just having feelings for things. Pero we are all, we have to dismantle that idea that we have to be separate.
Mm.
And it has to start with, of course, each person, right? And so I have to, as a again, as a press, publisher and editor, I have to know that um I have to be universal, and I have to know that there's struggle in all cultures, in all lives, and that I have to listen to all voices. And so that's where I think I've matured, and where I still see some people from one spectrum and the other still fighting for and talking about the same things. And it's like, no, we need to fight that. We need to fight that mentality, because there's still that 1% that's watching us fight and kill ourselves and kill each other, that are enjoying that.
Mm.
They're enjoying that view from above and watching us just kill each other, when really we need to be pushing each other to a level where hey, we've had this history, pero we need to get up. We need to move up together, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then you come to the Valley of Texas and right on the border, as you said, and you marry a Chicana, and now you all have a daughter that's part Chicana, part Salvadoreña.
She's
You
she's
know,
she's Tejana. She's Tejana. She's I think her grandma was Chicana, but she's like 5th-generation Tejana. Pero yeah, she's Mexican, Texan, Chicana. Ahí andan, right?
yeah,
Right. So yeah, so my daughter's like Chicanita, Guanaquita, Tejanita, you know,
you
and
know,
she
I identify
and
Chicano.
yeah, and
when you think about it, and even though there are differences, you know, there's people here from, as you say, in Central and South America. When you think about it, we're the brown people, we're the indigenous people, and the Native American, the indigenous people, Salvadoreños, Mexicanos, people de Guatemala, and even all the way down to Sudamerica, people that are up here. Once they're in the United States, they live the basic same kind of existence, right? I don't think the dominant society really makes a differentiation between different cultures from Central and South America, or for that matter, indigenous cultures. So we're subjected to, in a lot of ways, the same things, but there are interesting differences. And but for the most part, I think we're more alike than we are apart. We have some our foods, our kind of regionalismos, you know, and stuff. But it's interesting, you know, we have to come to terms with our own identity. But then, as you said, move it out towards all of humanity in our writings, you know, that we're all human beings.
And the thing that our people need to know is that we need to learn it when they don't even want to know it. So we need to learn it. We need to learn about our people and our history and all that because they don't even want to know it. So
well, and they don't teach us either. And
they're not gonna they don't want to know it, they don't want to teach it. So we need to learn it, and we need to educate more people, or more of our people, on it, so that we don't look mensos when they question us on it.
Yeah.
Right? Because then when they do question us and we're caught like deer in the headlights, and that's when we give up on learning, because we feel, man, you know, I don't know, you know, we sometimes just give up, you know, and we have to continue. Dale duro, dale duro. If we don't know, let's find out. Hey, no sé, pero I'm going to find out. I'm going to ask Juan si sabe. I'm going to ask, you know, aquel que anda haciendo Mexican American Studies textbooks. He knows. I'm going to ask him, and I'll be back, you know, but I don't know everything, you know, but I'll find out, you know, and then I'll come back.
And along those lines, you know, like I said, they don't teach it to us in the schools, very little about our cultural identity. You know, we're not in the textbooks for the most part. We're not in the curriculum. So the process here is, you know, assimilate, acculturate. They want to kind of homogenize us all. So we have to struggle to learn even our own culture at times, and to be proud of who we are and where we came from. That a lot of times even our own people don't know. So that's very important. So who were some of your once you started writing here, and as we mentioned, you know, this is your 7th book. So you, more than most, you know, Chicano Latino poets, Latinx poets, have published more than most of the people that I know. You know, you've published quite a lot, to your credit. Once you started writing, who then became your sort of writing influences besides the music?
Well, you know, I did a lot. At first, it was, you know, a lot of, I really adopted a lot of the Black history, you know, a lot of writing by the African American writers. So Richard Wright, you know, was a big influence in me, just in loving literature, and then knowing that he also wrote poetry really lit a flame in me, because I could, you know, understand his struggle in his you know, in his books, And then in his poetry, I was like, it was so beautiful and simple, his haiku, right? And then Luis Rodriguez wrote Always Running. And when I read that, and I always tell this story, I was so angry that he wrote that, you know. And I think it happens often with our own people, where we, you know, nos entra un como un coraje that somebody could write it, and it's our, and it feels like it's our story, and how dare someone else beat us to it, right? You know, but he's become one of my literary heroes. He's become someone that I'm very inspired by, you know, especially when it comes to, you know, bookstore and call center and stuff like that. You know, you and him are big influences and people that I look at and say, you know, like esa es una meta. That's what I want to do. I want to reach. I want to do what they've done and what they've been doing. You know, it's something that's very admirable and just beautiful to me. And so Luis Rodriguez's book Always Running was wonderful. And then I found out he wrote Concrete River, and which was poetry. So poetry always seemed to have always come back full circle. And so he had Concrete River, and then Richard Wright had the haiku, and then after that, it seemed like a a landfall of like of books that just fell on me that I didn't know existed. You know, I thought, you know, I was always very threatened by the literature by European writers, you know, because that's the stuff they were throwing at me at school, and I didn't understand it, and I didn't like it, and I didn't. Well, I just didn't understand it. Shakespeare, I was very like, you know, anti-Shakespeare in school. Why? Because I didn't understand the language. I didn't care for it. Nobody in my hood spoke that way, and so when I you know barked at my teacher about it in high school, she brought me a book called Manchild in the Promised Land by Claude Brown, and whoa, you know, a book about the Black experience by a kid who got shot right away at the beginning of the book, and his life just, he's there's drugs and there's poverty and there's, I mean, everything that's in the hood is in the book, but there's also racial issues in there, and then there's also education towards the end where he gets out of the ghetto and becomes something. And so it was very inspiring, and so those books really gave me that fire to enter the world of literature and just accept it and read. And then after that, I found Neruda and Lorca, and for a long time it was very, it was dominated by men. A lot of the literature that I read, and so not until later on did I start making it important for me to look for, writings by women, and because I wanted to know what was going on. It's like, who were men were the only ones writing, and were there other voices, and because the best storytellers in my family were, the women, mother, grandmother, tias. The men were always the quiet ones. They didn't talk. They sat in the corner drinking a beer. It's like, where are the great storytellers? The women had the stories. They had the, I mean, they knew the suffering of the families, and if they told the stories, they'd be like wonderful. So then later on, I run into, The House on Mango Street, and then all these other books, and then I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, where were all these books when I was in school?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons also that I thought publishing was so important. And kids like my daughter and your daughter, and they just need the books.
Yeah.
They need the books that will speak to them. right? I mean, there's a lot now, there's a lot out there now, but we still have the gatekeepers that aren't allowing those books to enter their neighborhoods. There's bookstores that are in different parts of the nation that will not take our books. So we need to find a way to get them there, right? And so we just need to keep writing them, and we need to keep writing them, and we need to keep searching for a way for them to get there. And now there's the people looking for books to create into movies, like Netflix and stuff like that. And so we're looking to get the literature made in hopes that it gets picked up by somebody that will take it to a bigger audience as well, right? And that's a dream for a publisher, for their author to hit it to another level, of course. That would be like amazing. Yeah, we win book awards for our authors win their book awards, and man, I feel like a proud dad. It's like,
I should mention that FlowerSong Press, that Edward is the publisher of, that organization. I think that y'all are one of the most important independent presses publishing, Chicanx, Latinx literature in the United States, and it's amazing what y'all have done. I think I asked you the other day, how many books did y'all publish this year? And you said something like 22 or 25 in 1 year. Is that correct, Edward?
We started with 7 in 2019, 23 in 2020, and we're going to do about 25 to finish off this year.
That's amazing. I mean, I know as publishers ourselves with Aztlan Libre Press, and you see some of the books behind me that we've published over the last 10, 11 years that we've been in operation, we went to a completely different model. We went to the model of we're only going to publish like 1 book a year or 1 book every other year. But I got to give you credit. One of the reasons that we went to that model is that we were getting so many manuscripts at the beginning that we couldn't even read them all. We were working full time. We were, working on other projects and had our family and trying to be creative, also musicians and writers and artists and so forth. So it's difficult. So I give you a lot of credit to be able to publish, because there are so many good writers out there that deserve to be published, and we need more independent presses, not only for our Native American, familia, but our, Chicanx, Latinx community across the nation, and more bookstores and distribution and promotion. So I applaud you for that. I want to mention that in one of your poems in Pandemia, you talk about, when you were a little boy and confronting your fears, by, you were afraid of dogs, so you were holding a dog or a snake or the spiders, walking to the spider web. And at the end of that poem, I think it's that same poem, you talk about, you wanted to be this, you want to be a fireman, you wanted to be something else. At the very end, you said, I wanted to help people. I became a poet. I thought that was an interesting line. Why do you think that poets help people? And are you primarily a poet? I mean, or have you published in other genres also?
I've only written poetry. I'm trying to write a novel. I'm trying to write short stories, but it's one of those things where, I graduated high school, and that's as far as I got, and that I started working, to get out of, I guess, poverty. Was tired of being, broke and poor. That to me, it felt like I needed to work. That's what we knew. That's what we knew. As soon as you get of age, go to work, and make money. And so, I mean, I wish I would have continued my education, and I just got stuck in I guess what you could say is a career. And so, but back to that. Yeah, I predominantly just write poetry, but I think the poet heals. As a poet myself, as I read poetry when there's I reference, sometimes poems depending on moods, you know and different poetry books do different things and at different times. I always see poetry as a living words on a page, because they speak differently to everyone all the time. So I feel like they're living organisms, these words on the page, because I could read a poem today, and depending on what mood I'm in, and I could read it again in a month, and if I'm in a different mood, it's gonna feel different. So yeah, poetry can get at you differently every time you read it, and as a poet, they always say, if you're not feeling, something, journal it, do some journal writing, might help you heal, might help you get it out. Well, it's the same with poetry. A lot of us are very vulnerable. We publish our vulnerabilities, right? And sometimes we publish or we write down other people's vulnerabilities, right? Because we're witness to sorrow, we're witness to hope, we're witness to sadness, we're witness to even celebration. And so the poet, I believe, is a witness to, and someone to document all of that. So when the pandemic hit, I felt an urge to write about it, because I was writing history, because it was our now. And and I felt that it was gonna heal those that were either gonna be in a position where I can't write during this time. I'm too scared, or this and that. But others need to continue doing it, right? For those that can't. And so there's times where I can't do something, and other people step in and do it. And reading through manuscripts as a publisher, I read lines and stuff in manuscripts that are very healing, that really do a lot for me. And it's exceptional, to read what people are doing, and writing, and afraid, and so it's going back to that. Yeah, I think poetry is essential and healing, and it's a superpower.
Hmm. Well, will you read another one from the book for us before we move on? Because I have a couple of other little things that I want to discuss with you. But I think that in this book, you really did capture this sort of this eerie feeling, like even in the cover that you see there to my left here behind me. That's a photograph that you took, and that's your daughter Bella in the background there, and some stranger that just walked in front of you and who's wearing a mask there.
Yeah.
But I think throughout this whole book, you really capture this feeling of the pandemic. There's this eerie, dreamlike, otherworldly kind of feeling that you write, and you talk about dreams a lot, and while it's not really overtly political, you talk about a lot of things in there about children, still are in tent cities, right? You talk about the homeless. We talk about, you use breathing and breath when this pandemic, as one of your very important motifs throughout the whole book. And I thought that was brilliant, because this pandemic, this coronavirus, was taking away our breath, was killing our people. It's killed over 760,000. They had to be on ventilators. They couldn't breathe. So, read another poem for us. I want to hear some of this so that people can hear also some of these feelings that you had about the pandemic. And this was written, I should add, some poems were written right before the pandemic hit really hard, but a lot of them were written during the pandemic back in February, March, and April and May, I think, of 2020, right, Edward?
Right.
And the pandemic was really hitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one's titled "I Only Breathe Here." I only breathe here, unnecessary inhaling. It's autumn again. My friend left me. A song has taken his place. A scythe sharpens. I only breathe here. A struggle in my throat. A weakened sigh. My dreams are real now. A truck is dismantling itself. Death is the scent. I breathe in the fatalities. The crawlers hum and show their teeth to him, to my nightmares. The hymn to my nightmares. I can only breathe in spurts. My lungs swell, my throat closes tight. I am paralyzed in my living room. The wood flooring swells. My friend returns in midair, a warble, to answer my dreams with rapid wings, then no more. Then I breathe again, and the floor hardens. I am barefoot, breathing, breathing, slowly. I swallow and wake from this nightmare. No one is here, no one but me, and a gasp.
Mm, I like that one. No one but me and a gasp. Again, that breathing and not being able to breathe, and the nightmares, and this other reality that has been taken over by this pandemic. Pretty amazing. I love your poetry, brother. You know, um, and um, God, like I said earlier, you know, 7 books, and you're getting ready to come up with your 8th book, right? When is that coming out?
It's looking like January.
What is that title?
Cry, howl.
Is that a takeoff on Ginsburg there?
Sort of, yeah, yeah. It kind of is, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
cool. And who's publishing that?
Prickly Pear Publishing. They're the ones who published Jazz House.
Excellent. Um, and as I mentioned earlier, you touch on a lot of issues, including, you know, racism and the homeless, and children in cages and tents still, and suicide. I think that Generation Z, you know, is pretty amazing also. It kind of brings us to this reality that the pandemic put us even more so. I mean, we're already in this computer, telephone, virtual world most of our lives, you know, but it seemed that the pandemic put us even more into it, you know, and isolated us, so that our only way, we were in quarantine, was to kind of just have our devices, you know, with us all the time. That's a short poem. Can you read that one? Because I think it's very poignant. The Generation Z.
Okay.
And it deals with suicide, you know.
Yeah. Generation Z. They both stare at their phones. Kid tugs at dad's shirt, then mother's dress. Neither budge. Kid sits on floor, picks up a snake, eats the snake, then throws up. Kid stands up, begs for attention, sits back down, picks up a gun, puts gun in mouth, pulls the trigger. Parents stare at each other, get on their phone, download an app to give them instructions on how to cry.
Oh, heavy.
We kind of lose what's in front of us by what's in front of us, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, death is another thing that is ever present in this book, obviously, because of the pandemic. I know we had a lot of close family members that died, aunt and uncle, a nephew, very young also, and others. Um, uh, and and you even talk about, on one of the poems you mentioned that the lungs of the earth are ablaze. And again, this pandemic deals with the lungs, of people, and was killing us, because we couldn't breathe, and how breathing and breath is important in your book. And here are the lungs of the earth that during this time are all ablaze in Brazil, right? Which is the rainforest there. So that while you don't hit the people over the head with these important political topics, you very subtly and sublimely, throw it in there, and it makes people think. And I really dig that about your poetry. It's not like the political poetry that I was raised with during the Chicano movement of the 70s, where it was like, oh, you racist dogs, you have to quit doing that in our barrios. This was very interesting and delicately woven into it. Yeah. Brenda Vaca's iPhone popping up. I don't know if y'all see that.
Put it on mute.
So I know that we're coming in at about 8 o'clock now. I don't know how you would like to proceed, Alexandra, and our friends there at Dallas Writing Workshop, if we want to open it up for questions at this point about the book. I should mention that if you're interested in purchasing Pandemia and Other Poems, so you can go to our website at aztlanlibrepress.com, and you see some of the other books that we've published over the years. And of course, Edward and FlowerSong Press have published many books over these years. And you can go to flowersongpress.com and check out their catalog of books also. And I urge all of y'all to go to our websites and buy a book or two, especially we're getting ready to go into the holidays here. They make great gifts, and books are as they say, the gifts that keep on giving, because you can share them with other people. So support independent presses like FlowerSong and Aztlan Libre Press. Thank you for that.
And I just want to say something real quick, because I promised I would. I want to thank Dr. Enrique E. Figueroa's Gente Chicana Somos Chicanos Arts Fund, which is a donor-advised fund at the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, for their grant to FlowerSong Press. We just found out that we got this generous grant from them. This grant will allow us to move forward with our Promise project, which is called Chicanx Visions book series, which is specifically focused on Chicanx authors. So, FlowerSong Press, we believe it is important to promote Chicanx poetry and writing. Chicanx poetry has always been about both celebration and protest. So celebrating Chicanx culture and people, and continuing to fight injustice, even though it's been almost, 60 years since Yo Soy Joaquin came into the world. The same issues that Epic addresses are still present in the world. It is necessary for Chicanx art to be produced, because it is necessary that the Chicanx speak about and to the world and their place in it. So we'll be putting something out on our website soon on the submission call for that. It'll be a series that we're going to start. It's going to be we'll put the information with more information on there, a submission call for that. But yeah, I wanted to give a thanks to the Greater Milwaukee Foundation and Dr. Enrique Figueroa for that. Appreciate that.
And this was a grant specifically to publish book length manuscripts, right?
It's a grant specifically to put out Chicanx work. So this grant's gonna help put out books and help us, pay and help get books out for like the upcoming books that are coming by Chicanx writers, like Matt Cedillo's new book coming out. It's gonna make it. It's gonna help us get those projects working. several Chicanics writers that are coming to FlowerSong Press in the next couple months will be you know will be funded and helped out by that.
Great, that's great. Congratulations on that. And I know that you're also, are you directing the Valley International Poetry Festival? Is that right also?
Right. So right, I'm the director of the Valley International Poetry Festival. And it's going into its 15th year this 2022, and so we have a call for submissions on that for our anthology called Boundless. And so if you go to our submissions page, you'll see something on that. We just finished taking submissions for the first Americo Paredes Book Prize of poetry and fiction. And so we're in the process of going through the manuscripts for that, and also just finished the call for the Speaking Shape anthology, which is visual poetry entirely composed of works by BIPOC writers, who are off, like we say, often overlooked in the dominated poetry venues by others.
Well, congratulations on that too. Like I said, the busiest man in Chicanx and Latinx literature. Keep up the great work that y'all are doing with FlowerSong.
But I have great support. It's not just me, right? I have a wonderful wife who's very supportive and helps out in a lot of things. I have a great FlowerSong Press group that helps me out. I have Lina Sanchez, Rodney Gomez, and I have a Matthew Revert who does some work with us from Australia, and a few others. If you check out our masthead, there's several names of different people doing different things there. So yeah, it's not it's not just me.
So nice. It takes that community.
It's people that believe in the work, and people that believe that it needs to happen. People that believe that there's an urgency to get these books created and put out there.
That's right. Well, again, congratulations. Do you want to add anything here before we maybe open it up for some questions or comments, Edward?
Maybe I'll let me read a poem that was asked for at the beginning by Alexandra. She wanted me to read a poem titled "You Can't Be a Writer and Hate Trees." You can't be a writer and hate trees. Not even if one falls on you or kills someone you love. Do clouds feel the pain when they tear apart from each other? What is the sound of their grief? Which holds the rain and which morphs into an elephant with a knife through the heart? Which one heads to the mountain head on, and which one loves the most? Do they make sounds when they dissipate? What of their gray throats? Does the sun pierce through the oldest? Does the moon have any use for clouds? There's a mild chatter the rain gives on these iron stairs that lead to you. It rained and then it didn't. My smile lasted longer. Do my hands run across your body like a train hugging its tracks, heading strong into a dark tunnel to die without fear? Or do they feel like rain, my sweet flower? There's a town where the dead live parallel to each other, above ground in homes with sad eyes. There are also dead that live blocks away, just a few feet under, with life to spare. New York, did Lorca write your story? Did he walk into your city like a skyscraper, with legs riding on you like a graffiti artist in the forgotten hours of the night? Does he dare to write about my border town with truth? Does his duende walk along the banks of the Rio Grande, weeping? Has anyone bothered to ask the trees for the truth?
Oh.
Woo.
All right. Alexandra,
I love that.
we're going to take it to some questions now.
I love
Sure,
that, by
yeah.
the way. I have to stop and just, that poem is incredibly amazing.
Yeah.
I loved it. Sorry.
Thank
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's why I asked for it. It's I just love the leaps in it, and I love the New York. Did Lorca write your story? Did he walk into your city like a skyscraper with legs writing on you like a graffiti artist in the forgotten hours of the night? I'm gonna think on that one for a while. No, I guess I'm gonna greedily ask one of my questions myself, and then I'm gonna happily turn it over to other people because we do have some nice questions in the chat, and feel free to post more. Or if you would like to ask a question directly to Edward, just put your name in the chat and David will know to unmute you. No, one thing, I think this is kind of going off of what you were saying, Juan, about the eerie, kind of unusual atmosphere in this book. But I loved that there was a lot of poems about sleep and dreaming. And you want to just talk a little bit about that? Like, was that your survival mechanism to get through the pandemic or not? Like, it's because obviously some of them are pretty intense poems about dreams that aren't comforting at all. But I just loved that was running through this book on the pandemia. So I just wanted you to comment on it in any way, Edward.
And before you get into that, Edward, I had a question that's related to that, so you can answer both.
Okay, sure.
Did you write actual dreams of yours? Are these, because there's various dreams in this book, right? Are those actual dreams, or are you just making them up? And they're like
some were actual nightmares, right? Yeah, they were. It was a very funky time because if there was a lockdown, right? So everybody was home. There was no school. I was always working. I'm an essential worker, right? So, but I think there were times where I it felt like I was home more, but I wasn't. But there was just this strangeness on the streets, strangeness just everywhere, even in the air, even in everything, even driving to work. And so everything that you think of on a regular, you have your routine when everything seems normal, right? You get up and you do this and you do that, you get in your car and it seems like everything's the same. You're gonna drive by the same things and stuff. And during the pandemic, well, at the beginning, everything just seemed a little eerie. It was, there was a lot of fear. People didn't know what was going on, and so your mind starts to go into these different, I think, thought process, right? So you start listening to different stories. You start, having different conversations at home. You start seeing different things happening. So I think all of those things created a different mindset, a different, dreams to enter my system. And I think a few of those times I messed around with, trying, melatonin to chillax, right? And melatonin to me gives me the most vivid dreams sometimes. And so, everything was just, I was remembering more. I was paying more attention to things during the beginning of the pandemic because I was more aware, especially what was going on in politics, what was going on with where is the pandemic. I was like tracking it. Oh, it's in Europe. It's coming here. So, where are things? So I was writing down a lot of what was going on and even my feelings because I was even having to see doctors, for just, personal health, issues. I have to get my thyroid checked. I'm 40, 6 years old at the time, 47. And I've got to go check my cholesterol, got to check my high blood pressure, see how I'm doing, And so, I'm checking all this stuff. And so I'm paying more attention to what's going on with me physically, mentally, and what's going on with everything around me. So all of that and the fear of what could happen, and then listening to, people dying, it was just like, okay, that it could happen to me, it could happen to us. So I think all of that, taking all that in during the wake stages, kind of seeped in during, my dream state. And so, yeah, my wife and I, mostly her, took to gardening,
Mm,
right? So we spend a lot of time with the earth. So
mhm,
that's where the breathing came in. The earth is breathing. The earth is still alive. The earth is still pushing up the flowers. It's still pushing up the grass. The trees, paying more attention to the tree, paying more attention to just to nature and to the song of the birds. I write a lot about birds. I write a lot about trees. I write a lot about nature. If lately that's I've done a lot of that, and so I've read more on nature too. Linda Hogan's book Dwellings. I don't know if you've read it, but that's such a wonderful book. And that also kind of like opened up my mind to you know nature and the song of nature, and that we're just kind of here hanging out, but it's not really ours. We're kind of just invading it. We're messing it up. We're throwing concrete on what should be you know uh some beautiful landscape for animals.
mm.
But
And
yeah,
that and that comes out, very clearly in your book here in Pandemia. Seems like you did get back in touch with the earth and with gardening and the flowers and the birds. I think one of the poems you have even that, your feet are in feeling the mud between your toes, right? And one thing when it was raining or something, but very prominent in this book also, which is
right,
interesting what we got into during this time when we were isolated and quarantined at home. What did we do
right.
at home during this time? Are there any questions or
Yeah.
comments from the people?
Um, there was a nice poem a little further up. Just let me get, yeah. It's from Mr. Tezozomok. How do you as a publisher fight the unconscious gatekeeper syndrome? So kind of a question about being a publisher, Edward.
How do we fight the unconscious gatekeeper syndrome?
Mm.
Like just knowing that they're there, or
That we are gatekeepers for people that get published. So the unconscious
or
syndrome. What do they mean by that exactly? I mean,
Yeah, no,
obviously there are certain biases and things that I think people that make selections on what to be published, it depending on who the publishers are, obviously they have preferences and they have um, policies depending on the publishing company. What do they specialize in and so forth. Just like the uh, big 5 or 6 out of New York publishing companies and their unconscious or maybe conscious biases and who they publish, which in a lot of ways is not, people of color for the most part, or hire people of color. Maybe they can explain a little bit more, but what are your thoughts on that, Edward?
well, I'm trying to get a, like, when I was talking about the gatekeepers, like, for example, I've had authors that will email certain bookstores to try to get their book in, and they get ignored. They don't even get a return email, or they give them the runaround, and I mean, it's kind of like, why not? It's like what about it, you know you don't like, or you don't want. It's a great story, or even if it's like it's got an award-winning sticker on it, like they'll say something like, send it to us and we'll read it, and if we like it, we'll let you know. It's like, well, somebody liked it, they won an award. It's like, if you put it in, if you display it with an award-winning sticker, people are going to ask about it, and then you tell them it's an award-winning, novel or something, but they don't. It's like, how much more do we need to get in? You know, we appreciate getting into many of the bookstores we get into, but we shouldn't have to, feel like we're lucky to get into them. We should feel like we can get into every bookstore, because it's literature, it's books, hey, um, it's a novel, it's something new, or it's poetry. Why, if you have Charles Bukowski, why can't you have, Edward Vidaurre, or why can't you have, you know, you know, you have E. Cummings, why can't you have Matt Cedillo? And what's the difference? How are you going to educate the poetry readers if all you're doing is just giving them the same old thing over and over again? you know um they don't know any better. I mean, how many people really do know poetry, right? We don't teach them that there's contemporary poets. That when I first started reading poetry, I thought that it was just written by dead people. I didn't know people wrote poetry. I really didn't. I didn't know they wrote poetry, until, I actually found, until Luis Rodriguez. I was like, oh, he wrote poetry. But all the other poets that I had, saw were, dead. And so, I mean, you could fill up a stadium with living poets, you fill up a small country with poets, right? And people still won't know that there are poets right now, alive and well, because people don't make a fuss about it. I mean, we got to start with the bookstores, and say, hey, when people come and ask about poetry, we should have the alive and well, and poets now, or even poets from their own town, local authors, they're living here, they could be your neighbor, and they're writing, and they're right here, boom. But we need to make sure that that's happening, and some they're not getting that chance. And so we do Zoom readings, and we try to go into Barnes and Noble and do a reading, and we send out postcards, and we email, and I mean, we try to do as much as possible, but it's a
And
labor.
and we need to
No,
make sure and hold these people accountable that in the publishing industry to publish more diverse voices, and also libraries and bookstores to, hey, get our books in there,
Right.
ask for them. Go to our website, at flowersongpress.com, aztlanlibre.press.com. We're here, and while we're fulfilling a very important role, we're not waiting for these big publishers to publish our people, which they don't do to a great extent. And that's one of the reasons why we exist. We still have to hold them accountable, and they need to open up to these diverse voices, and especially, I think, also the libraries and bookstores and the schools now are very important that we have to. And it's perfect for what's going on right now with them trying to ban these books going on in the school libraries. That's going to be an interesting fight here. Other questions or comments?
yeah, anyone, if you have questions to ask Edward, we have about 6 minutes. And I was just gonna chime off of what you were saying, Edward. I was it's amazing how a lot of teens and high schools and everything, they're not reading contemporary poets. And don't get me wrong, that obviously there's great poets who are dead who we want to read. It just shouldn't be all that we're reading. And
Right.
like San Antonio, I'm from the New York area, but I feel blessed in San Antonio because there's such a lively culture here, and as in the Rio Grande Valley as well, with so many poets. And high school, it still seems to be, I don't know if there's like a curriculum like revolution that needs to happen, right? Where or a lot of mentoring. Gemini, we're trying to start a teen mentorship program in honor of the wonderful Greg Barrios, who we lost in August, because he was such a mentor of writers. And it's kind of just what you're talking about, like letting the young writers meet, learn and be coached by some of these contemporary authors and know their writing is a path for them. That's a valid life pursuit. So whatever, I just, there's a lot to talk about there, right? Yeah. Anissa has some great suggestions. More poems from you, Edward. We want to hear from you. And so Los Pájaros Saben and Restlessness, you want to read a few more? I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Los pájaros saben. Los pájaros saben. They perch on wires looking down at me with sorrow. Los pájaros saben. I whistle a tune. The kiskadee turns away. Los pájaros saben. The moon is sliced in half beyond the western skies. Los pájaros saben. The mockingbirds orchestrate the shrill of a pandemic. Los pájaros saben. The woodpecker's Morse code is the answer. Los pájaros saben. The nervousness in the way my wrists toss birdseed. Los pájaros saben. They know of the dying clergymen in Italy and locusts in Oman. Los pájaros saben why the river feels so familiar to drowning children. Los pájaros saben that a poet stands below them in search of words. Restlessness. I woke up half man, half horse, a metamorphosis. An incomplete mist laying on earth, looking up at clouds, making strange faces, waking birds at dawn, feeling my heart pump blood heat to my tired lung.
Oh.
No, great to kind of end with your words, Edward, because that's why we're here, because of your words, Are you going to have some upcoming future readings we can tell people about so they can hear more from you?
Not yet. I haven't set up anything yet, but I will. They can, follow me on Facebook or check out my edwardvidaurre.com page, and I'll post anything that I have coming up. But yeah, right now just doing a lot of setting up for the press authors and yeah, going from there. I haven't read in a while, so I felt pretty good. I missed it. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
There's something like about virtual readings, though, as opposed to live readings. There's nothing like live readings and in person, So I just want to thank you, Edward, and thank Gemini Inc. and Dallas Writing Workshops and the Big Texas Read for inviting me here today and featuring your book and your work. And thank everybody who joined us tonight. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. It was wonderful.
It was so great to hear your work,
Beautiful.
Edward, as always.
Thank you.
Come back anytime.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks, Edward. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
If I don't unpin you, do you just stay there for the rest of eternity? Is that what happens?
Be careful in that creepy town that you're
I
in.
hope you're. Yeah.
Yes, thanks,
I know, I'm
Anissa.
all worried about you,
Yeah, I hope
David.
you get out of there.
Well,
Just get out of there safe.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, just
Safe.
The virtual
I'm gonna take-
cyberspace.
yeah,
safe.
seriously.
Right.
Be safe. Take care. Thank you, everyone.
You'll
All
figure
right.
it out, David. Just be smart. Yeah.
Thanks a
Very
lot,
smart,
David. You'll have a
Tobin.
great evening, everybody.
Bye, Juan.
No, thanks, Juan. Great questions. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Alexander. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Vincent, are you there? Okay,
Who? Me?
No, Vincent Cooper, who's a good friend of mine. So I hope you